Hi, class. Sorry I can't be there tonight. I'm actually at the airport as you are watching this, but I'm on my way to Chicago. My uncle passed away on Sunday and it was very sudden. And it's pretty hard on my mom and the family, so she really wanted me to be there. So I am on my way to Chicago for the funeral. Please keep us all in your prayers as we endure this time. Here is my presentation. I had the chapter on culture and I really enjoyed reading it. And here's my summary. Brian starts out by explaining that pastors, including himself, is guilty of trying to help people in the church and the church community get to God, but instead of leading them to God, they end up pushing them further away from church and anything related to church. And it's not done intentionally, but it happens this way. There was so much brought out that I felt like he was talking about different churches that I have actually attended in the past, and I have lived in some of the examples he described. Brian mentioned protecting people from alcoholism, but not going to places where alcohol is being served. And to go a step further, not to associate yourself with people who drink to prevent you from going to any of those types of parties. This reminds me of the scripture in Ephesians 5 and 18, where it talks about not being drunk. The scripture says, and to be not drunk with wine, in which is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. When Brian talks about being adulterous, he explains that pastors put so much pressure on the subject that what begins to happen is people start feeling uncomfortable with themselves, as well as just uncomfortable with talking about sex, the opposite sex, their own confused with their own sexuality. He goes on to say that some Christians shouldn't even watch R-rated movies, shouldn't listen to certain types of music. All these different activities he felt takes away time from God. But as long as you're attending church, when church opens, when it closes, everything is okay. When I read this, it brought me back to a church I attended growing up, and we spent a ton of time at the church, and also a church that I attended with my husband, where we were at church about 3, sometimes 4 days a week. And the church services, there was no set time limit, so we could be there for hours. It ended up putting a strain on our marriage, and also we lost 3 good years of really getting to know our children. We thought that we were happy. We thought our sons were happy, and we really didn't know what was going on until we left. And in hindsight, was able to see everything that took place and how we could have done things differently. We almost felt like it was you're kind of brainwashed in a sense, but not purposely, not intentionally, like Brian says. But that's how we felt. We finally came to a realization that we were living the life our pastors wanted us to live because that's what they believed you had to be and do to prove you're a Christian. I believe that if there wasn't so much pressure to be at every service all the time, I think that church members, if they were able to come freely and willingly, they would be a lot happier. They wouldn't have a sense of being burdened down, being at church, or not happy to be there. Church is a safe place, as Brian says, and that's how pastors see it and want it to stay. So if you're in church, you're safe. Now, when Brian brings up that the church preaches on topics that it's okay to be middle class and not be very successful or make a lot of money, I don't necessarily agree with that. Many churches I listen to on TV and a few that I've attended in the past, it seems like they want you to make a lot of money because if you make a lot of money, that brings in money to them in their pocket or their church building, and you may or may not know what they're actually doing with the money. But it seems I don't agree with what Brian was saying, and maybe he needed to go into more detail on that particular subject. There was a church we attended once, and we realized that when we gave so much, it was noted or presented to certain members of the church that was on the finance committee and a few other members, and we began to feel like we were getting taken advantage of because of our faithfulness and our tithes and offering. It didn't seem fair and it didn't seem right, but We gave with our heart, and when it came time for us in a crisis or us in a need, the church was not there for us. We lost a lot because of our giving to the church, but we know in our heart that God is always faithful, and we were continually blessed even after leaving the church. But it was a hard time for us. Brian also talks about people losing their faith and not participating in to not participate in. He wanted to protect the churches, the pastors wanted to protect people from not losing their faith, so they didn't want them to participate in philosophy, which falls into the lines of what we've already read from the Bible in modern times. He says that when you read and learn, it makes you more susceptible to believe anything else other than the triune God. You aren't to participate in the arts because of the nudity that you're exposed to, nor reading social sciences, which could lead to becoming a criminal, a liberal, or even a homosexual. As Brian was speaking on behalf of himself and all the other pastors out there, he explained that they didn't want Christians to be in the world, but they were more comfortable with Christians being under the influence of the church, not outside of the church culture. While trying to save people from the world, that's when the point is missing, Brian explains. Although Jesus called us not to be of this world, this is often confusing. I remember when I first started homeschooling our sons. God allowed me to cross paths with many other homeschooling mothers, and at the time it was a great experience, but I also learned some pros and cons. There was one mother that I met who did not have any good things to say about public and private schools. She believed that her children would be corrupted by any and everything they were exposed to that was out of her control. She wanted to protect her children from what she believed was not of God, and yet her children weren't able to be that light in darkness either. So although she was teaching her children to live a certain way and to try to be like God, and you know, that example wasn't able to be put on display in public to help those other children who maybe needed to see those examples and to live from those examples. Because sometimes children seeing other children is the only, example they may have, because maybe the other children don't go to church or their parents aren't Christians. What Brian explains from the passage in the Bible in John 17, it says, Father, protect them by the power of your name, in verse 11. It didn't mean protecting was a means of isolation, just like the homeschool mother I described. When you go further into the scripture, it states, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, Jesus asked his Father, but that you protect them from the evil one, verses 14 through 16. The way we are protected is by our identity. There is a song called They'll Know We Are Christians by Our Love. The words are so simple and yet so profound. When you are set apart without even saying anything, people will know who you are, and they will be able to distinguish your character, and they will know there's something different about you. There are two suggested hints Jesus gives on how to live holy in the world according to Brian McLaren. The first way is being made holy and set apart. He gives an example of how he watches a certain movie, and I can relate to this. Dr. Doty, one of my professors in the undergraduate program, had a way of showing us a movie and how to interpret and discern what God was trying to say, what God was trying to show us through it. I'm forever grateful for that, because now every time I watch a movie, I look at it a different way. It's not just enjoying the comedy of the movie or the romance in the movie, but I try to see what God is really trying to speak to me through it. If he wants me to help somebody else, if it's something to help me in my marriage and something to help with my children, a situation that has come up already, or maybe prepare me for a situation. I try to find little quiet moments in movies now, and it's because of the way Dr. Doty was able to show us there is another way to watch movies. The second suggested hint is Jesus prays to God the Father and says, as you